Silk by Alessandro Baricco. A rice paper panel slid open, and Erve Junko entered. Haruki was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the farthest corner of the room. He had on a dark tunic and wore no jewels. The only visible sign of his power was a woman lying beside him, unmoving, her head resting on his lap, eyes closed, arms hidden under a loose red robe that spread around her, like a flame, on the ash-colored mat. Slowly he ran one hand through her hair. He seemed to be caressing the coat of a precious, sleeping animal. Erve Junku crossed the room, waited for a sign from his host, and sat down opposite him. A servant arrived imperceptibly and placed before them 2 cups of tea. Harake began to speak, in his own language, in a sing-song voice that melted into a sort of irritating artificial falsetto. Erve Junku listened. He kept his eyes fixed on those of Harake, and only for an instant, almost without realizing it, lowered them to the face of the woman. It was the face of a girl. He raised them again. Harake paused, picked up one of the cup of tea, brought it to his lips, let some moment pass and said, "Try to tell me who you are." He said it in French, drawing out the vowels in a hoarse voice but true. To the most invisible man in Japan, the master of all world might take away from that island. Erve Junko tried to explain who he was. He did it in his own language, speaking slowly, without knowing precisely if Harake was able to understand. Instinctively, he rejected prudence, reporting simply, without invention and without omission, everything that was true. He set forth small details and crucial events in the same tone, and with barely visible gesture, imitating the hypnotic pace, melancholy and neutral, of a catalogue of objects rescued from a fire. Harake listened, and not a shadow of an expression discomposed the feature of his face. He kept his eyes fixed on Erve Junko's lips, as if they were the last lines of a farewell letter. The room was so silent and still that what happened unexpectedly seemed a huge event, and yet was nothing. Suddenly, without moving at all, that girl opened her eyes. Junko did not pause, but instinctively lowered his gaze to her, and what he saw, without pausing, was that those eyes did not have an oriental shape, and that they were fixed, with a disconcerting intensity on him, as if from the start, from under the eyelids, they had done nothing else. Hervé Junko turned his gaze elsewhere, as naturally as he could, trying to continue his story with no perceptible difference in his voice. He stopped only when his eyes fell on the cup of tea, placed on the floor, in front of him. He took it in one hand, brought it to his lips, and drank slowly. He began to speak again as he set it down in front of him. France, the ocean voyage, the scent of the mulberry trees in Lavilledieu, the steam trains, Helene's voice. Hervé Junco continued to tell the story, as he had never in his life done. The girl continued to stare at him, with a violence that wrenched from every word the obligation to be memorable. The room seemed to have slipped into an irreversible stillness, when suddenly, and in utter silence, she stuck one hand outside her robe and slid it along the mat in front of her. Hervé Junco saw that pale spot reach the end of his field of vision, saw it touch Harake's cup of tea, and then absurdly continued to slide until, without hesitation, it grasped another cup, which was inexorably the cup he had drunk from, raised it lightly, and carried it away. Not for an instant had Harake stopped staring expressionlessly at Hervé Junco's lips. The girl lifted her head slightly. For the first time she took her eyes off Hervé Junco and rested them on the cup. Slowly, she rotated it until she had her lips at the exact point where he had drunk. Half closing her eyes, she took a sip of tea. She removed the cup from her lips. She slid it back to where she had picked it up. Her hand vanished under her robe. She rested her head again on Harake's lap, eyes open, fixed on those of Hervé Junco. Hervé Junco spoke again at length. He stopped only when Harake took his eyes off him and nodded his head slightly. Silence. In French, drawing out the vowels in a hoarse voice but true. Harake said, "If you are willing, I would like to see you return." For the first time, he smiled. "The eggs you have with you are fish eggs, worth little more than nothing." Hervé Junco lowered his gaze. There was his cup of tea. He picked it up and began to revolve it, and to observe it, as if he were searching for something on the painted line of the rim. When he found what he was looking for, he placed his lips there and drank. Then he put the cup down in front of him and said, "I know." Harake laughed in amusement. "Is that why you paid in false gold?" "I paid for what I bought." Harake became serious again. "When you leave here, you will have what you want. When I leave this island, alive, you will receive the gold that is due you. You have my word." Hervé Junco did not expect an answer. He rose, took a few steps backward, and bowed. The last thing he saw before he left was her eyes, staring into his, perfectly mute.